for one of the 6 geographical portions of the Archdiocese known as Vicariate. So specifically, I am the Episcopal Vicar of Vicariate 3, which includes St. Paul Parish and also includes the now closed St. Adalbert's Parish. That means that I have the direct pastoral responsibility, not just for the entity, St. Paul Parish, but also for the spiritual needs of all of its parishioners. And just a little bit of background. The party with the real interest in this proceeding is St. Paul Parish. St. Paul is the successor parish to the closed St. Adalbert's Parish. When St. Adalbert's was closed, its parishioners and its assets were consolidated with St. Paul's, which became a larger, more sustainable parish. As I will discuss more at length, the future vitality of St. Paul's depends on its ability to fully utilize all of the resources it owns, including the assets of the closed St. Adalbert's Parish. Legally, the reason St. Paul's is the party is that it is the beneficial owner of the St. Adalbert property. The Archdiocese of Chicago is organized by statute as the Catholic Bishop of Chicago, a corporation sole under Illinois law. Under the statute and under the bylaws of the corporation, the Catholic bishop holds legal title to the property of the parishes, but only does so in trust for its parishes. Therefore, when a parish is closed, the assets are held in trust for the parishioners who will then be associated with the new parish. Once that happens, the Catholic bishop holds the assets in trust for the new parish. Thus, the Catholic bishop holds legal title to the St. Adalbert property in trust for the parishioners of St. Paul Parish. Now, St. Adalbert Parish was first created not as a church building, but as a community of Catholic faithful who wanted to worship as a community parish in the Archdiocese of Chicago. The faithful formed a group and collected funds to show that they could maintain a sustainable parish, and our then Archbishop made an essentially religious decision to bring the ministry of the church to this group of faithful by forming a new parish. That was a canonical, if you will, church law act, an act in accordance with the church's code of canon law. The parish exists as what we call a juridic person under canon law. Once the church recognizes a parish, it has a special, separate existence under canon law, and it exists unless it is closed. Our technical word is suppressed in accord with canon law. The process of closing a parish is complex and faith-driven. I say it is faith-driven because it reflects the decision ultimately by the Archbishop that closing a particular parish best serves the faith mission of the Church, the Archdiocese, and even the parishioners of the parish that is being closed. Again, this is an essentially religious decision made by the Church to further its ministry in the way the Church believes will best serve the people of God. Just to give you the flavor of the process, we started by considering our core mission of bringing people to Jesus Christ. We have parishes so that people can encounter Christ through the celebration of the sacraments and enjoy the fellowship of a parish community. We choose to create parishes where we think we can best meet those needs. Part of this task includes ensuring that all the faithful have access to a parish, to a community of faith, and to the requisite number of clergy to celebrate the sacraments. So to state the obvious, this means that we have to consider whether a proposed new parish will be sustainable, both in membership numbers and in financial support, before such approval given. Similarly, when it becomes clear that a parish is not sustainable, we need to use the same principles to determine what is best for the parishioners. For example, the population of the Pilsen neighborhood has decreased significantly in recent decades, leaving far fewer potential parishioners to support the parishes. Obviously, such a drop in numbers requires a consolidation so that the resulting parish can sustain itself. What many people don't realize is that in a world of very limited resources, keeping a non-sustainable parish afloat comes at the expense of other parishes that could potentially be sustainable. In other words, from a mission perspective, a failure to close a non-sustainable parish actually puts at risk our larger mission of having any parishes at all to serve the needs of the faithful. That is why I say that, however painful it might be, and I recognize this is a painful experience for many people, closing a non-sustainable parish is actually in the best spiritual interest of the parishioners, because it will allow them to become parishioners of a more stable, more sustainable parish that will hopefully serve the needs of generations to come. I have no doubt that the people of St. Adalbert's were very sad to hear that their parish was being closed. But as the shepherd of this vicariate, it is my view that we are ministering to them more effectively and permanently at St. Paul's. In short, after due consultation with the faithful, the Archdiocese created St. Adalbert's in fulfillment of its religious mission, and again, after consultation with the faithful, closed St. Adalbert and strengthened St. Paul's in fulfillment of exactly the same religious mission. I have said that these were faith-driven decisions. I want to give another example of that which applies in this case. In the early 20th century, the American Catholic Church received millions of Catholic immigrants, primarily from Europe. Each of these immigrant groups spoke their own language, and each national group had a distinct way of worshiping within the church. To be sure, there was uniformity of doctrine and worship, but there were also cultural differences reflected in the liturgies and devotional practices. To serve the spiritual needs of these immigrants, the American Church established many national parishes, which were parishes based on nationality or ethnicity, rather than on geographical territory. Oftentimes, several national parishes coexisted in the same neighborhood, just blocks apart from each other. Thus, for instance, St. Adalbert came to be known as a Polish parish, offering masses in Polish in a neighborhood with 5 other churches, all in an area of 6 blocks. However, over time, immigrant populations assimilated and concentrations of immigrants moved out of the city neighborhoods into suburbs or dispersed throughout the city. Former neighborhoods defined by ethnicity became more pluralistic, and as a result of successive generations moving to other parts of the city. As a result, the Archdiocese found that in many places it had separate parishes only a block or 2 apart from each other, while in other areas we had no churches at all. Equally important, our concept of fellowship and worship has evolved over time. Especially after the Second Vatican Council in the 1960s, we have come to believe in more inclusive, more universal church. Thus, it is far more consistent with our present beliefs to view a parish as a community of faithful of all backgrounds, worshiping together, rather than as small groups segregated by language or national origin. In fact, it is our belief that our universal Catholic faith is all that is needed to create a community of the faithful, irrespective of national origin. Thus, for all these reasons, Dioceses in this country, including the Archdiocese of Chicago, have reduced or ultimately eliminated national parishes in favor of territorial parishes, consolidating so-called next-door churches into a single faith community. We maintain that this both increases sustainability and better reflects our religious beliefs. In the case of St. Adalbert's, the Archdiocese closed a non-sustainable Polish national parish that was located in a neighborhood where very few Polish people still live, in order to create instead an enlarged, sustainable, territorial St. Paul parish to serve the spiritual needs of all who are in its territory. Quite frankly, the idea that the government, this landmark commission, or the city council thinks that it should second-guess these fundamentally religious decisions about how to effectuate Catholic ministry in Pilsen is an offense to our right for religious self-governance and thus to our right to the free exercise of religion. Before I conclude, I want to say a word about the effort of the relatively small group of people who oppose the closure of St. Adalbert. This is a group of people, some of whom are descendants of original immigrants from Poland who no longer live in the area, who are very disappointed by the decision to close St. Adalbert. That doesn't deny them a right to speak, but I think it is worth noting that they are placing their needs ahead of the actual former parishioners of St. Adalbert's, who are now the parishioners of St. Paul's, who were consulted and overwhelmingly supported the closing of the St. Adalbert Church. It is also important to note that this group has been opposing the measure for several years through many means. This landmarking proceeding is but the latest attempt to thwart the success of St. Paul's. Our understanding is that the group has enlisted the aldermen to their cause. That only makes it worse. I would think that the last thing the city would want would be to inject itself into an internal religious dispute within the Catholic Church. And just to be clear, the Catholic Church does offer an elaborate legal process by which parishioners can object to parish closures, going all the way to the Vatican and the Pope. This group has formally objected, and their appeals have been presented to and rejected at every level within the Church's appeal process, up to and including its highest authorities in the Vatican. Paraphrasing the United States Supreme Court, the government cannot substitute its judgment for that of the highest judiciary of a hierarchical church on matters of faith and doctrine. Whether and where to have a parish is such a question, and it has been decided by our church. The city should thus stay out of what the Supreme Court called this religious thicket. The Commission should not allow itself to be used as a weapon in an internal church dispute. In conclusion, the parishioners of St. Paul Parish include parishioners of the former St. Adalbert Parish. Their forebearers admirably contributed from their want to build St. Adalbert with the help of the Archdiocese. The needs of this Catholic community have changed over the last 100 years. The ministry of St. Paul's depends on being able to utilize all of its assets, including the former St. Adalbert's buildings. These assets belong to the parishioners of St. Paul's Parish, and not to the general public, the city, the neighborhood, or the ward. The St. Paul's parishioners cannot be denied their right to use those assets for their spiritual well-being, for they are the spiritual descendants of the very people who built St. Adalbert's. Landmarking St. Adalbert's will prevent the parishioners of St. Paul from selling the property and using their own charitable assets for the religious purposes for which those assets were donated. It will threaten the sustainability of St. Paul Parish. It will thwart an essentially religious decision by the Church about how and where to provide Catholic ministry in Pilsen. It also will interfere with an equally religious decision about the elimination of national parishes in favor of territorial parishes. Finally, it will inject the city into an underlying, ongoing religious dispute between the present parishioners of St. Paul's, supported by the Archdiocese of Chicago, and a handful of former parishioners or descendants of parishioners who opposed closing St. Adalbert, a dispute over which the government has no jurisdiction and from which it must abstain. I urge the Commission to respect the right of the Church to determine for itself how best to marshal its scarce resources to serve the faithful and to choose where to have parishes. I urge the Commission not to landmark St. Adalbert and thereby not to cripple St. Paul's. I urge the Commission to recommend St. Adalbert not be designated a church landmark. Thank you very much.